Alrighty, our last video for the weekend is the last one just finished off on ratifying of the Constitution. We're going to look at some elements of the Constitution. First element of the Constitution is the preamble to the Constitution, and this defines the purpose of government, or the purpose of what the Constitution is going to be. Very important. Then you have the Articles of the Constitution, and there's 7 articles in the Constitution. And I put there, this is also the main bodies of the Constitution. The first 3 articles establish 3 branches of government and define power. Very important. And the last 4 deal with states, national law, and the amendment process. How to amend the Constitution when you need change and things of that nature. Remember, the word amendment just means change. So when you amend something, you change it. So the amendments are formal changes to the Constitution, like I just said. Excuse me, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Remember, those are called the Bill of Rights. Now, here's some principles. Think of the principles as the big ideas of the Constitution. The first one's popular sovereignty. All power lies with the people. The people elect the politicians. Remember, that's just the idea behind our government. The next one is limited government. You can put this number 2. I apologize. I think the numbers are going to be off from this point here. A limited government. No government is all too powerful. You have majority rule versus minority rule, or minority rights is another way to look at it. And when we talk about minorities in government right now, we just talk about not ethnic or culture minorities, unless we're talking about civil rights, of course, but we're referring to it as political minorities. You know, you have that freedom of expression, you have that freedom of choice and things of this nature. And those a lot of times can be minorities in politics. So majority rule, what the people mainly want, but you still do protect the minority and their right to speak out against that. The rule of law. American people and government have to abide by the system of constitutional laws, and nobody is above the law. Remember that. That's important. Look at Richard Nixon. So nobody's above the law. You have separation of powers, 3 branches of government. This is big, because you have that 3 branches because you have checks and balances. Presidents have the right to veto. Congress can overturn the president's veto with 2/3 of votes, supermajority. And then judicial review as well. You have appointments and impeachment. These are all things that they all use with each other to check and balance to make sure not one part of the 3 branches of government is too powerful. And that's a very tiny looking graph that we're not going to apparently look at today. Last one's federalism. This is big. This is our system of power, how we divide power within our government. Refer to our last lecture last week. And so this is how we divide power among the states and how we interact with the federal government. Remember, federal government is more powerful than the state governments. You don't believe me? One of the topics we talked about was medicinal marijuana, and how all those are being shut down, you know, in the various states that did pass it legally for that reason, and how all these dispensaries were systematically shut down and are being systematically shut down throughout the United States. So again, state laws might say one thing, but remember, federal law trumps state law. Some more principles of the Constitution, very big. I cannot express to you how big this court case is and this concept here is. Marbury versus Madison. Wow. Huge. It establishes the concept of judicial review. You might be sitting there going, well, what is judicial review? And like it says here, it's the power of the courts to determine whether what government does is in accord with what the Constitution provides. The Supreme Court justices, why they are so important is because they're the ones who decide, again, if something is constitutional or unconstitutional. They're the ones who interpret the law. Very, very powerful. That is why it is so important to know who the judge is. Are they conservative? Are they liberal? Are they a swing vote? And so that is why a lot of judges will stay on before they retire, and they'll be like, really, really old, according to you guys, really young, according to, depends on how you look at it, but like 70, 80, which is getting up there. But they'll stay on because it depends on who's in president. If they're liberal and you have a conservative president, they're not going to retire because they don't want their seat given up to a conservative judge, and vice versa. And that's just what it means is unconstitutional. They find things unconstitutional. Just remember that. There's this picture of the Supreme Court, very, once again, tiny. Next one is individual rights, and that's the Bill of Rights. Those things are guaranteed in the Constitution. And the first 10 amendments are the Bill of Rights. Many think the First Amendment, obviously, very, very important. Some argue the Second Amendment as a protection of gun rights. But too many people misinterpret what that amendment was actually written for and what it's supposed to be. It's so you can have a well-armed militia, and you have the right to do that. Not that you can own an AK-47, a tank, and a bazooka. It was for, at the time period, that if the government fails, just like John Locke was talking about, if the government fails to do what the people want, that we have the right to form a militia and overthrow that government, and you have to have guns in order to do that. A lot of people blow this out of proportion, and I know the NRA is big on protecting people's rights and their Second Amendment rights. The hardest thing is we touched on this in class, is there's really no, it seems like no easy way to answer this question. You don't really want the government probably taking away individual rights, because where does it stop? So it's a slippery slope there. And the other thing is how do you stop crazy people from buying guns and doing harm to innocent people? And you really can't. And that's the horrible part about it. And so it's very difficult to repeal the Second Amendment or to change the wording of it, because it's such a hot topic issue. And so the NRA, because of that, is a very, very powerful organization trying to protect gun rights for individuals. You just got to ask yourself, what caliber gun do you really need in the United States? Like, if you're using it for hunting, if you got to use an Uzi to hunt, you might want to think about, I don't know, maybe finding a different sport, because that's probably not what the intent of that was. It's for that. And there's a Bill of Rights, very, again, tiny photo. And the principal author of the Bill of Rights is James Madison, and he used a lot of it from the Virginia Declaration of Rights. It's again, the framework for our American government. We got a lot of it again from the English Bill of Rights. We talked about that earlier. And then here's just some other people that helped influence what we got, and not what we got in the Bill of Rights. First Amendments to the Constitution. Remember that. I wouldn't really William Blackstone, the laws of England. Again, all these things on here influenced how the Bill of Rights were written, and influenced what was put into the Bill of Rights. There was originally 12, but only 10 were ratified, which means accepted, in 1791. Very important. And understand this. Remember, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists wanted to keep the Constitution as is, and the Anti-Federalists wanted to change the Constitution because they didn't have a Bill of Rights. So this was a concession between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and that's why the Constitution was ratified and accepted, because the Federalists said that they would have a Bill of Rights. We will stop on interpreting the Constitution. This is where we will end and begin our part 4 of our lecture.